All right, what's up everybody? Scott Brio here. I wanted to talk about the TAL J-8 plugin that I got recently. I had the Arturia plugin, the Arturia version of the Jupiter-8 already. It's a fantastic sounding synth, right? It looks nice. It's got a cool panel that you can open up, can, change a bunch of stuff in the top half. But, I'm not a huge fan of, just for the sake of things, making a plugin look like the hardware keyboard. It's cool, it sounds great, it's definitely usable, but I tend to prefer plugins that have a plugin user interface rather than something that looks like a recreation of the hardware that kind of sacrifices on space. And I know it's a minor difference. It's not going to be a deal breaker to probably anyone other than me. But, for me, real estate on my screen is kind of, well, I've got multiple screens here, but still, screen real estate is very important to me. And so having something that's compact and highly usable and not intimidating for a lot of people. I mean, even myself, with all the experience I've got, I still get intimidated sometimes by plugins if there's a lot going on and it's really kind of confusing and overwhelming. But, I also really like what TAL does in general with their plugins. They started with some amazing chorus and reverb and delay plugins. Those were all fantastic, many years ago. Still highly usable today. They also have the Juno 60 chorus emulation that they did that just sounds bang on, sounds super good. And then, they moved on and they did the TAL sampler. And the TAL sampler was something that I had been waiting for a long time. Really a long time. I just wanted a software sampler that was going to kind of emulate the sound of the hardware stuff that I started on, right? Because that was the cool thing about hardware samplers. I mean, sure, you've got the tactileness of a hardware sampler, but having that crunchy converter sound and the warmth that a lot of those had was really kind of what drew me to those early samplers. So the TAL sampler having its DAC, its DAC emulation where you can choose EMU2, SP1200, all those different DAC choices in there, really sounds good. It's really impressive, and you can really kind of dial in some vintage sound to a lot of your samples. But anyway, this is not a video about the TAL sampler. We can do another one of those. This is a video about the TAL J-8. And the TAL J-8 really sounds bang on to an original Jupiter. And there are some differences between the TAL J-8 and Arturia's rendition of the same plugin. They're little things that we're gonna go over. I'll show you the differences. But mainly I wanna focus on why I like the TAL version of the Jupiter-8 so much. And I'm not gonna go through every single function of the thing, right? Some other people have videos of that, going through every single preset and function. I just want to show you why I like it and the things that make it a little bit different to me and the ways that I would use it. And at the end of the video, I'll show you some clips of myself using it and making some sounds with it that I would go on to use in actual songs. All right, so let's flip over here and I will show you the plugin in Ableton. So the first thing that struck me about the J-8 is it just sounds almost exactly like a Jupiter-8. And of course, I don't have a Jupiter-8 here with me. I don't have one. They're very expensive. And they're older, they're older synths, but I have heard lots of demos on it. I have heard them in person. I've used friends' Jupiter-8s, and so I'm pretty familiar with them. And this thing just sounds bang on. It sounds spot on as far as authenticity for the original keyboard. What I was reading online said that the people at TAL have a Jupiter-8 and they made the plugin to sound like their Jupiter-8, which is really cool because I would imagine each synth, being that they're older vintage hardware synths, kind of have their own character to a certain degree. Now, favorite thing so far that I have found on the TAL J-8 is this little button up here. It's the service control panel. And the service control panel essentially lets you take each oscillator. You can change the cutoff and tune each oscillator or detune, as well as change the attack, decay, and release rate of that oscillator. And this is amazing because, for the first time, really, I don't think I've ever seen this before, you can make your synth sound very much like it's kind of old hardware. And, as if they haven't done that enough already, you can really make it sound like it's vintage and kind of aging. You can make each oscillator sound off. And, you can go into even more depth with this where you can adjust the cutoff, for instance, per oscillator. So then every time a note is played and that oscillator triggers, the cutoff will be different for each one. And so you can almost kind of dial in this parameter lock thing. If you're familiar with the Electron stuff, there's almost this parameter lock of tune and cutoff and attack decay, release for each oscillator. And that's really powerful. I mean, you can really dial in some awesome sounding stuff and make things sound really organic, right? I mean, half of what we're trying to do as musicians is make what we make in the computer or in these, boxes here that we use to make music sound less computerized and more organic and more humanized. And this service control panel will definitely do that. So let's hear how that sounds. All right, so I've got just a little melody, synth-based melody in here that I put in. And what I've done is I have tuned the cutoff of all of these oscillators just a little bit differently. So let's go ahead and let's put them back up at 0, or at least the main ones. And let's listen to it. And then I'm gonna dial the cutoff back and you can see and hear what it's really doing as the notes play. So you can hear it. The filter is kind of closing and opening per step or per note that's played. And it just gives it another dimension of character, which is really, really nice. And of course, if you go in and do this with all the other settings in here, you can dial in some really organic sounds. This section over here, you've got the balance between the lower and upper panel select, which is really cool. The upper and lower panel select, essentially, we're gonna come back to it, but it means that you can have essentially 2 TAL J8s stacked on top of each other, just in the one instance of the plugin. So you could have one sound on the upper half of the keys, another sound on the lower half of the keys, or you can have 2 sounds playing across the whole key bed, and that's really, really cool. That just allows for a lot of flexibility, and you can really start stacking things and making some really awesome sounds. And then so the balance knob here is what's going to let you blend between the 2 of the sounds. Also, the master tune and octave knob. The master tune is great because if you've got a bunch of sounds that you've made in your music session and your synth is just a little off for whatever reason, you can just dial that in here and you don't have to worry about repitching, everything else. You've also got your octave knob here, and the octave knob is just a great idea. I love that it's right there on the left side of the panel. It's right in your face. It allows you to raise and lower the octave of both patches on the VST. So if you want to do some bass sounds for the first half of the song and then raise it up an octave to kind of bring in some more energy for the second half of the song, you can do that very, very easily. And you can even automate it with just the turn of a dial right here. The key mode here is where you're going to dial in the different presets for how your panel select sounds are layered. So you've got the whole, you've got split, and you've got dual. Whole is going to make your upper or lower panel setting cover the entire thing by itself. Dual is going to make it so that it's half and half, so you can play stuff here, different sounds. Split is going to make it so that half of your sounds are on the upper range of your keyboard and the other panel sounds are on the lower half. And dual is going to make it so that both sounds play at the same time all the way across the keyboard. Really, really cool stuff. Now, one thing I did want to point out, and I've got to move my synth over here so I can see what I'm talking about. The camera's right there. When you are loading in a sound, initially, you can go up here and you can select your sound. And what that will do is that will select the overall synth preset for what you want it to sound like. But then when you're dialing in different panel selects, you want to use this load, copy, and paste right here because if you don't, this will override the panel select. So when you click upper, you can click load and you can go in here and you can choose, we'll do easy acid, that's a good one. And then what you want to do is you want to select lower and then load in your second one. And now what you've got is a proper loading of both sounds. And if we go to split, you should be able to hear that. So I'll go ahead and hit split. And then from here on down, you've got one sound. And from C4 up, you've got your other sound. And then if you do dual, you've got both sounds layered across the whole thing. And this is really powerful. Something else I want to show you, just a minor detail here, but it matters. When you have a lower sound selected, and I'm going to go ahead and raise the release here so that it carries out, trails on, and you've got your other sound here. When you switch between the two, the sounds don't cut each other off. So you really kind of have two sound engines going here. And that is, again, a really nice attention to detail. I've had some hardware and other plugins and stuff that have the same kind of functionality, and you switch between the sounds and it just cuts them off. And it's like, well, what's the point of that? You know, I mean, that's half of the point of using one of these, like if you were going to perform or even just for recording stuff. Sometimes you like to get tricky and hit the buttons, and if it cuts off, then it kind of ruins things for you. So there you've got your one sound, and you can still hear the other one trailing out as your other sound comes in. And you've got the hold functions right here, which are really nice, because you know, if you're coming up with a sound and you're making something original and you don't want to keep holding down the sound on your keyboard or whatever, then it's really nice to click hold and it'll just hold it down for you. And there, I think we found maybe a bug. I don't know if it's a feature or not, but I noticed that when you click hold and you hold a note down and then you stop your transport, for whatever reason, the note still kind of keeps playing out until you hit another note, but it doesn't sound the same as when you initially hit the note and clicked hold. So I'm not sure what's going on there. It's almost kind of like a ghost note, but it's kind of cool because it makes it sound like a piece of hardware, right? Sometimes hardware has these weird little bugs in it. I call them ghosts in the machine. And so here, I'll replay it for you so you can hear it. See, really weird. I'm not sure what's going on there, but worthy of noting anyway. Speaking of bugs, the service control panel, as well as the calibration section here, really kind of let you dial in some vintage flaws to your plugin, which is great. You're able to dial in the upper tone of the VCO. You can dial in filter drive, as well as the resonance intensity and the envelope decay roll-off. By doing that, between the service control panel and the calibration here, you can really kind of make things sound even more vintage and even more analog than a plugin usually is. I also, of course, love TAL's delays and reverbs, like I said before. So the delay sounds great, as well as your chorus here. These are the Juno 60 choruses, and there's one and there's two, and you can use each by itself or both together, and they just sound fantastic. If you're going for a really wide sound, use both together, and man, it'll just pop out at you. All right, now we were talking earlier in the video about the differences between Arturia's version of the Jupiter-8 and TAL's. To be honest, there's not a ton of differences. The obvious differences would be things like the chorus that TAL has in theirs. The delay is TAL's own delay. Arturia has some of its own unique features, but for the most part, they sound pretty similar. I did notice, however, that the Arturia version of the Jupiter-8 has a much sharper sound overall. There's much more high frequency content in just your average initialized patch, and I'll show you. So if we swing over to our right monitor here, first off, I'm going to play Arturia's version of the plugin, and what you'll see, I want you to pay attention to, is this area where the plugin lies, and this is an initialized patch. I did as much as I could to dial in the same volume settings, level match everything, choose the same settings across the board. But what you'll notice is that Arturia's plugin has a much brighter sound than TAL's. So the Arturia, the top of the curve, rests right here between -54 and -51 versus TAL's -60 and -57. And so let's go back and forth between the two. And again, all the filter settings are the same. That's just the overall tone of each synth, kind of inherently. And I think that's good. You know, if you want a little bit of a darker sounding Jupiter plugin, go for TALs. If you want a little bit brighter of one, a little bit more top end sheen, get Arturias, or get both. So anyway, let's flip back over to the other screen. I'm gonna make some sounds for y'all and show you how I use the TAL J8 in my own songs. have it. That was my review and kind of showcasing of TAL's new Jupiter-8 recreation plugin. It's a really amazing plugin. I love what TAL does. So thank you all for joining me. If you like what I do, please hit the like and subscribe button down there. Trying to get to enough subscribers so that I can monetize, and I'm almost there, so I just need a little bit more. So anyway, I do lots of these videos on music production, and I've got a podcast called The Voice of Electronic Music. I do tutorials, lots of other things. So thank you for being here, and I will see you all on the next one. Peace out.